Our first game that we're going to be talking about is Oh My Goods by Alexander Pfister. Now, Oh My Goods is such a tiny... I was always very intrigued by such a tiny card-based game that seemed like a Euro-y experience. Because I feel like there should be pocket versions of every single type of game or game mechanic, so you can use it as a way of introducing non-gamers or people who are kind of curious about the hobby. So it's like this always appealed to me as a, hey, this is like a Euro in a card game version. Essentially, in Oh My Goods, you're playing as different craftsmen or craft people, and you're going to be, ultimately trying to build different buildings that produce different goods, creating a bit of an engine with that, and ultimately being able to have the most victory points, which, you know, it's a combination of the buildings that you've been able to create and all the different assistants that you've been able to hire. Now, cleverly, the way this works is it's all cards. This actually plays 2 to 4 players. I was looking at it more as a solo experience for which you actually need to bring in one of the expansions, but let's just focus on this one first. With this one, we've played it as a 2-player experience. You start with your initial building, which is a char burner. All these cards are multi-use cards, so if you're using them on the back of the card is just signifying that they're good units, and so you put them on top of your building to signify how many goods you have of the type of good that is produced in that building. And also every good has a dollar value or a coin value. So ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that you're generating a lot of goods that then you can use as coin, essentially, as currency, to purchase and build new buildings. Interestingly, what's going to be happening is every round you're going to have a market that is a variable market, because you have the cards are going to start to splay from left to right, and you're waiting for 2 halves of the sun to come out for the first market. So you start showing, one card at a time. You see 1 half of a sun go ooh, and waiting for the second card to come out. And so that line of cards could be only 2 cards, or it could be 5 cards, or it could be 10 cards. So that element is quite exciting. Then the next thing is, based on those elements that are there, you need to look at your buildings to decide, okay, which of the goods am I going to need for my building to be able to produce? Because in this game, you don't actually have to pick those resources. They just have to be available in the market for you to be able to produce. So, for example, I may need 2 brick and 2 coal to produce something. As long as there are 2 brick and 2 coal in that market, I'm going to be able to produce.
Mm-hmm. But you can also add the cards that are in your hand.
You will,
as well. So you've got a hand of cards that give you additional resources. You've got the market cards that are depicting resources that are available as a pool to anybody.
Yeah.
But the trick is that you have to choose one building that's going to produce that round when you start, because you've only got 1 worker card.
You start with just the 1 worker that you need to kind of commit and allocate to 1 building to produce.
Yeah.
Then the next layer of that is you get to decide, are you going to produce, high quality, and meaning you have to meet every single resource in order for that building to produce, or are you going to produce sloppily, meaning that you can actually you can get a discount of 1 resource. And while looking at the market going, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it, then you can go, I'm just going to go sloppily and hope for the best. Because then that's not over. You then get a second round of that market that obviously we have no idea what resources are going to become available, but you get a second round of that market, and then you hope and pray that your good, that the goods that you need are going to come through.
That burnt me so many times.
But again, you can play it fairly safely and only go for things that that between the goods that are already showing in the market and the ones that you have in your hand that you'd be able to pay for, you would definitely be producing. If you come short and you weren't producing sloppily, you produce nothing. So it's a waste of a turn.
So you're kind of gambling that the resources that you need are going to appear. And it's a good payoff if it does. But sometimes you only get 2 additional resources because the 2 halves of the sun come out immediately following each other, and you're like, oh no, I've wasted this turn. But what I like about this game is there's a bit of a race element, because the game will end as soon as someone builds their 8th building, which means that there there's multiple ways to win in this game. One is you could build really cheap, easy to build buildings and just pump them out as quickly as possible.
A lot of those victory points from those buildings,
Yeah, and stop your opponent from building up too much of an engine where they are producing a lot of money each round. So that is one strategy. You can kind of race and end the game quickly. The other, of course, is that you can really nurture the engine building element, because as you build buildings that create more interesting materials, you can then feed those more interesting materials into other buildings to produce higher value goods. And so you do start to get this engine happening. And once you start collecting lots of different types of goods, you get the opportunity to have a secondary production occur in the building that you're using by feeding in additional resources in the same turn. So that's a bit confusing to talk about when you haven't played it, but essentially it means that the longer the game goes on, the more materials and money you have available to you to get things done.
For the chain production, it's called.
That's right, The other thing you can do is you can, you can hire more workers. And if you're hiring more workers, then each round, instead of activating just one building, you can activate 2 or more buildings.
Yes.
But you can't get a worker until you've built up your little community with enough buildings that are indicated on those
standards.
worker cards.
They'll only come and work with you or for you because they're assistants really. So they'll only come and assist you if you've got the right types of or combinations of buildings. So they're kind of color coded.
But the interesting tension I always found in the competitive game of this was just the one person, usually Maggie, doing a much better job of building the engine while I'm trying to rush the end game. And sometimes that paid off for me, and other times it really didn't. A lot of the times it really didn't, because I didn't have enough money at the end of the game, which also gets converted to victory points. So at the end of the game, all you're doing is really adding up all of the victory points that are on your buildings that you've built. You're translating all of your...
all the assistants as well. So all the points and assistants. And then translating all the goods, which are then coins. So they all have their own coin value.
Into money and then into victory points.
Yeah, exactly. So a 5 to 1 kind of ratio thing.
And I think the time on the box is pretty indicative of a 2-player game, about half an hour. And it's a lot of game in a little box. I personally find it a little bit fiddly for my taste. But I found that the more that I played it, the quicker it certainly got, and it was much easier.
I like how it's one of those games where there's not really a lot of interaction between players. So you're kind of, you've got, which
I like that less.
So Amy likes interaction. I really just love being able to do my own thing, build my own kind of production line of things. The only point of interaction is really those assistants, because someone might take the one that you wanted. But again, because you can see what kind of buildings they need, often I'll be like, oh, I really want to get that assistant. But I can see that Amy's nowhere near being able to recruit them because she doesn't have the right building. So there's not really that much of a rush. Then the other element that I really enjoy actually is which some people may not like, is the uncertainty of that market going, oh, is it going to be a really big and, market with lots of stuff in it that I'm going to be able to have my choice of, which building do I want to get to produce? Or is it going to be one of those 1 card, 2 cards and it's done and you're like, oh no.
But I do like the way that half of it is revealed before you have to make a decision about which building you're going to activate, because then you have at least partial information and you can take a safe choice if you want to take a safe choice.
It's not just pure gambling.
I think that's also why I lost a lot. I don't like taking the safe choice.
But there's and I'm very risk averse, so I would often just be like, no, I'm just going to do the safe
sure thing.
The safe way here, which is I'm just going to build sloppily. I know that I can afford it with the stuff that I have in my hands. So I actually really enjoy this. There is going to be, as I kind of foretold or forementioned, there are expansions to it, which then turn it into a bit of a campaign and add a solo mode to it. I haven't actually had a chance to play with that yet, but I'm really, really looking forward to it, because what my understanding of it is that then it adds a bit of a story mode to it, and it starts introducing different characters and different buildings and new stuff and items and specific specific goals that you're trying to meet. So there's going to be set conditions by the end of the game in order for you to be able to kind of beat or win that game. So so that I haven't actually played the there's 2 of them, I believe, but so I won't go into that in detail. Probably once I have, we will. But that's Oh My Goods by Alexander Fister.